They killed Death's daughter, now the universe will suffer. Best HFY stories. The universe had never seen a being like Seraphina. She was the daughter of Death herself. But she was different, alive, vibrant, with an aura that sparkled like the stars themselves. She had inherited her mother's ability to end lives. But instead of bringing pain, she offered peace. It was said that Seraphina had the power to end suffering, to release souls trapped in eternal limbo, and to guide them to their final resting place. She had no enemies, no desire for conflict, only to ease the burden of life for those who needed it most. But, as with all things, peace is fleeting. A group of cruel beings, known as the Harrowers, feared the balance Seraphina brought to the universe. To them, death was a tool to control, to bend the galaxy to their will. They thrived on fear, on the suffering of others. They believed that with Seraphina gone, the universe would fall into chaos, and they could reign unchallenged. And so, in the dead of night, they struck. The attack was brutal, swift, and without mercy. Seraphina was surrounded by the darkness of the Harrower's magic before she could even lift a finger in defense. They killed her, not with weapons, but with the cruelty of their hearts. They erased her from existence, casting her body into the void, where no one would ever find her again. The universe, however, would not be so easily deceived. The wrath of Death. When Death learned of her daughter's murder, the cosmos itself trembled. Her grief was like a storm that swept across galaxies, and the very fabric of existence groaned under the weight of her fury. Death had watched over the universe for eons, bringing balance to all things, but she had never experienced loss like this. She had loved Seraphina with a depth that transcended time and space. The stars dimmed as Death stood alone in her realm, her heart consumed by the fire of vengeance. She whispered to the winds of the universe, and those winds carried her words across the galaxies. Who dares defy me? Who dares take from me what is mine? The universe, knowing better than to ignore her wrath, shook in fear. The Harrowers had underestimated the force they had provoked. The reckoning begins. Across countless worlds, people began to feel the shift in the balance. The Harrowers, once rulers in their own right, suddenly found themselves marked. Those who had been loyal to them grew silent, as if afraid to speak their names. The once mighty Harrowers began to disappear, one by one, as if they were being erased from existence. First, the colonies on the edge of the galaxy went dark. The lights flickered and went out. Then entire planets vanished, sucked into the void. No trace of the Harrowers or their minions remained. Some said it was a curse. Others whispered that it was the wrath of the gods. But those who had survived knew the truth. Death was coming for them, and nothing could stop her. On one of the most powerful worlds of the Harrowers, the leader of the faction, a ruthless being named Karath, stood alone in his palace. His eyes, once full of arrogance, now glinted with fear. The air in his throne room grew colder as the shadow of Death stretched across the walls. You think you can escape me, Karath? A voice boomed, rich and terrifying. It came from all around him, vibrating the very air. The ground cracked beneath his feet as the sky outside darkened. Karath tried to run, to hide, but the shadows followed him, relentless. In an instant, the palace crumbled, his empire reduced to rubble, and Karath was no more. His screams echoed in the void, fading into nothingness. The universe watches. The galaxy was in chaos. Those who had lived under the Harrower's cruel rule now found themselves free, but at what cost? Entire star systems were unrecognizable. Their planets turned to dust, their inhabitants scattered or lost to time. Some rejoiced, others trembled, knowing that Death's vengeance was far from over. In the farthest reaches of space, a lone traveler stood on the edge of a ruined world, watching the stars. They killed her, the traveler whispered, their voice thick with sorrow. They killed Death's daughter, and now the universe will suffer, not from her wrath, but from the endless echoes of a cosmos without balance. A deep silence fell, and for a moment, all was still. The universe had always known that life and death were two sides of the same coin, that one could not exist without the other. With Seraphina's death, that delicate balance had been shattered, and now, Death herself would walk the galaxy, not as a bringer of peace, but as an unstoppable force of nature. The reckoning had begun. Epilogue, the final judgment. Seraphina's death had not just unleashed Death's fury, it had awakened something else, something older. The ancient beings who had watched over the universe, keeping its fragile balance, now felt the disturbance in the fabric of reality. They knew that death's wrath was just the beginning. And so, they too moved, slowly but surely, toward the epicenter of this growing chaos. For if death could fall into grief, if she could lose herself to vengeance, what hope was there for the universe? But one thing was certain, the harrowers had made a fatal mistake. They had killed Death's daughter. And now, the universe would pay. They killed Death's daughter, now the universe will suffer. Best HFY Stories Part 2. The echoes of Seraphina's death reverberated across the universe, creating a ripple effect that reached even the most isolated of worlds. Some beings, long dismissed as myths, stirred in the darkness. The great titans of the void, ancient creatures of unimaginable power, had never once interfered with the living cosmos. But the universe's delicate balance had been broken, and the consequences were now far-reaching. A universe in chaos. On the once prosperous planet of Ilkara, a renowned scientist named Dr. Aliera watched the stars above. As a child, she had studied the universe's origins, the delicate weave of life, death, and time. She knew better than anyone that the death of Seraphina was no mere tragedy. It was the unraveling of the cosmos itself. Her fingers trembled as she pored over her data, trying to make sense of the sudden and inexplicable events happening throughout the galaxy. Star systems were disappearing, entire populations wiped out by some unknown force. Some theorized that the gods were angry, others that it was an unforeseen cosmic event. But Aliera knew the truth: the universe had lost its balance, and death had come for those who had caused it. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw a warning flash across her screen. It wasn't just the harrowers who were suffering. Across every inhabited world, a new pattern had emerged. A silent force was hunting down anyone who had once crossed the harrowers' path, killing them in ways so precise, so inevitable, that no one could stop it. And in its wake, the universe became quieter, emptier. The arrival of the elders. In the deepest corners of space, a council of ancient beings convened, the elders of the beyond. Ancient and powerful entities that existed beyond the comprehension of mortals, had once made a pact to observe the universe and intervene only when absolutely necessary. They had kept watch for eons, but the murder of Seraphina had forced them to act. The leader of the elders, an ageless figure known only as the voice of the infinite, stood at the center of their chamber. The light around him pulsed like the heart of the galaxy itself. The balance is shattered, the voice intoned, his voice echoing through the chamber. Death's wrath will not be contained, and the universe is already paying the price. We must intervene before it consumes us all. But she is not our responsibility, another elder argued, his voice like the rumbling of distant thunder. The death of a mortal should not provoke such chaos. You misunderstand, the voice of the infinite replied. Seraphina was not merely a mortal. She was a cornerstone of the fabric of existence. The murder of one who holds such power does not simply create a void, it destabilizes everything. Death herself will not stop until she has erased all those responsible. And should she succeed, the universe will be torn asunder. We cannot allow that. The elders debated for hours, but one thing became clear: they had no choice but to act. The hunt begins. As the elders prepared their intervention, Death herself began her long journey across the cosmos. With every passing moment, her presence grew stronger, darker. The stars themselves dimmed in her wake, their light swallowed by an ever-growing shadow. Her wrath was not the mindless rage of a destroyer, but a calculated, relentless pursuit of justice, a force of nature that could not be reasoned with. Meanwhile, a ragtag group of survivors from the fallen Harrower's empire, who had once been pawns in their cruel games, found themselves with no place to hide. They had tried to escape to the outer rim, far from the prying eyes of the galaxy, but Death's reach was far greater than they had imagined. Among them was Kalin, a former lieutenant of the Harrowers, once a trusted servant of Koroth. Now, with his empire crumbled, he found himself lost and hunted. He had been loyal once, had believed in their cause, but now, he realized how wrong he had been. The death of Seraphina had awakened something in him, an understanding that the universe could not survive without balance. Kalin's survival instincts kicked in. He knew he had to find Seraphina's mother, Death herself. There was no other way to escape the wrath that followed. But he was not the only one who had come to this conclusion. The once proud empire's former leaders had all realized the same thing. A twisted competition for survival had begun, with every rogue faction trying to reach death before the others. Kalen's path led him to an abandoned temple on a forgotten moon, a place he had only heard of in whispers. It was said to be a resting place for the dead, a place where the line between life and death blurred. But what he found there shocked him: ancient texts that spoke of a ritual, one that could potentially end the chaos and restore balance to the universe. But it came with a terrible cost. A bargain with death. The ritual, however, was not something Kalen could perform alone. He would need to find the last remaining descendants of Seraphina's bloodline, if any were left. The ritual required an heir of Seraphina's essence, a being tied to both life and death, to restore the equilibrium that had been lost. The universe's survival hinged on this. But as Kalen began his search, he was pursued by a relentless enemy, the remnants of the harrowers who had begun to fear for their own survival. Desperate to hold on to what little power they had left, they tracked him across the galaxy, determined to stop him before he could undo the destruction they had caused. With every passing day, the universe teetered on the edge of destruction. But for Kalen, there was no turning back. He knew what he had to do. The final confrontation. On a barren world, where the last remnants of Seraphina's bloodline had hidden, Kalen found what he had been searching for: a young girl, no older than 16, with eyes that shimmered with the same ethereal glow that Seraphina had once possessed. She was the last living heir of Death's daughter. But as Kalen approached her, a dark presence descended upon the planet. Death herself had arrived. "You seek to undo what has been done," she said, her voice colder than the void. "But the universe cannot be saved by mortal hands. It must be destroyed to be reborn." Kalen knelt before her, his voice trembling with urgency. "I seek to restore balance, to right the wrong that was done. Please, Death, allow us to undo the chaos before it consumes everything." Death's gaze lingered on him, her eyes full of sorrow and pain. She nodded slowly. "It is not my will to destroy all," she said, "but there is no other way." In that moment, the fate of the universe hung in the balance. With the ritual in place and Death's reluctant blessing, Kalen, the last heir, and the remnants of Seraphina's essence would face the ultimate test. Would they succeed in restoring balance, or would the universe fall to eternal chaos? Only time would tell. Epilogue: The New Dawn. The stars flickered to life once more. The sky was no longer consumed by shadows. Death had claimed her vengeance, but she had also given the universe a second chance. The echoes of Seraphina's death would never be forgotten, but they had brought about a rebirth, a new era where balance and peace could once again flourish. For now, the universe would survive, but the cost had been great, and the consequences of disrupting such a delicate equilibrium would linger for eons to come. And though the stars once again burned bright, there were still whispers in the darkness, echoes of an unstoppable force that could never be truly defeated. Death's wrath had passed, but its legacy would forever shape the cosmos. The universe would pay. They killed Death's daughter, now the universe will suffer. Best HFY Stories Part 3. The Great Awakening. It had been years since the ritual was performed, years since the final battle had been fought. The universe, scarred but surviving, had slowly begun to recover from the cataclysmic events that had followed Seraphina's death. The balance, once lost, had been tentatively restored, but it wasn't the same. Death, in her infinite wisdom, had allowed the universe to heal, but it had come with a price, an uneasy peace that few dared to disturb. But in the deep reaches of space, beyond the veil of known galaxies, something else was stirring. The stars flickered in ways they had never done before. The ancient beings known as the Elders began to notice a subtle shift, something darker, deeper, and far older than anything they had seen before. The fabric of reality was trembling again, and this time, it wasn't the wrath of death they felt, but something far more terrifying. The Ancient Ones. Long before death had become a force of nature, there had been others, ancient beings who existed before time itself. They were not gods, nor were they mortals. They were entities who predated even the universe's birth, beings whose power transcended space and time. They were known as the Ancient Ones, and they had once ruled over the cosmos with a cold and calculating hand. Their reign had ended when the fabric of reality had been torn apart during the birth of the first stars. For eons, they had slumbered, their consciousness scattered in the void, waiting for the day when they would awaken and claim the universe as their own once again. But now, they were stirring. The ritual performed to restore balance had unknowingly disturbed the slumber of the Ancient Ones. As the stars began to fade and the shadows deepened once more, these entities began to awaken. They had felt the death of Seraphina, and they understood its implications. Her death, though it had brought Death herself into a furious reckoning, had also weakened the cosmic boundaries they had once set in place. The first signs of their return were subtle, flickering stars that blinked out, entire worlds disappearing without a trace, and the sudden appearance of strange, eldritch creatures in the farthest corners of the galaxy. These creatures were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, beasts of pure darkness, whose very presence bent the laws of physics. They were harbingers, scouts for a much greater force that was coming. The descent of the void. The elders watched in silence as these signs grew stronger. They knew they could not ignore the threat any longer. They had intervened before, when Seraphina had died. But this was different. The universe had always operated on balance, life, death, and the space in between. But the Ancient Ones were not bound by this balance. They were beings of pure entropy, beings who sought to unmake the universe and remake it in their own image. With their awakening, the entire cosmos was now at risk. One by one, the worlds that had once known peace under the governance of the elders began to fall. Entire sectors of the galaxy were consumed by darkness. Ships, once considered the epitome of technological advancement, disappeared into the void without a whisper. Even the most powerful empires, the ones who had managed to survive the Harrower's downfall, now found themselves facing annihilation. The first of the Ancient Ones to emerge was a being known as Ankarth, a being of pure shadow, whose presence drained all light and warmth from the universe. Ankarth had once been the ruler of a forgotten dimension, a dimension that now existed only as an echo. With his awakening, the cosmos trembled, for his power could bend even the very laws of reality. He could create worlds and tear them apart with a thought. His hunger was insatiable, and he sought to consume everything, to turn the universe into his own cold, desolate kingdom. Ankarth's arrival sparked panic across the galaxy. Empires crumbled, and desperate calls for help were sent to the elders. But the elders, now fractured by the return of these ancient beings, found themselves powerless. They had never anticipated such a threat, one that existed outside the laws of the universe itself. Kalen's last hope. Meanwhile, on a distant world once ruled by the Harrowers, Kalen had found his purpose. He had helped perform the ritual that had restored balance, but the price had been steep. The heir of Seraphina's bloodline, the young girl who had been the key to the ritual, had vanished into the ether, lost to the very forces that had tried to tear apart the universe. Kalen, though, had never stopped searching. He had always known that the ritual was only a temporary solution. It had restored balance, yes, but the cost had been too great. The universe was not truly healed, and now, with the return of the Ancient Ones, it was clear that the universe was on the brink of total destruction. In his heart, Kalen knew what he had to do. He had to find the last remaining piece of Seraphina's legacy, the one fragment of power that could stand against the Ancient Ones. But where could it be found? A voice in his mind whispered the answer. It was a memory, one he had almost forgotten, an ancient prophecy, one that had been passed down through the hidden corridors of the galaxy. The prophecy spoke of the last light, a force born from the heart of death itself, capable of challenging even the primordial forces of the Ancient Ones. Kalen set out, not as a soldier, but as a seeker. He knew the risks, but he also knew that if he didn't act, the universe would be lost forever. He traveled to the farthest reaches of space, to the place where the final remnants of Seraphina's essence had been hidden, an ancient tomb, buried deep within a dead star. The final stand. As Kalen journeyed through the galaxy, the forces of darkness grew stronger. The Ancient Ones were unrelenting, worlds were falling, and every moment brought the universe closer to annihilation. But in the deepest part of his heart, Kalen felt a spark of hope. At the heart of the dead star, in a place untouched by time, he found what he was looking for. A glowing shard of pure energy, the last remnant of Seraphina's essence. It pulsed with an eerie light, as if alive. Kalen knew that this was the key to saving the universe. He could feel its power, the power of life, death, and everything in between. As he grasped the shard, a vision flooded his mind, Seraphina's face, her serene smile, her calm and comforting presence. She spoke to him, her voice soft and filled with wisdom. You are the universe's last hope. Kalen, do not fail. With the shard in hand, Kalen returned to the heart of the galaxy, where the final battle against the Ancient Ones would take place. The universe's fate rested in his hands. Would he be able to wield Seraphina's power to destroy the Ancient Ones, or would the universe be consumed by darkness? The final battle had begun, and this time, the universe would not be a passive observer. This time, the universe would fight back. They killed Death's daughter, now the universe will suffer. Best HFY Stories, Part 4. The Last Light Rises. Kalen stood at the edge of the galaxy, the shard of Seraphina's essence pulsing with an ethereal glow in his hand. It was the only weapon capable of challenging the Ancient Ones, beings who transcended the laws of nature itself. Behind him, the remnants of the galaxy, the embers of civilizations long lost, the crumbled empires of the harrowers and their victims, watched with bated breath. The universe itself seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for the inevitable clash. Above him, the sky had turned a sickly shade of purple, the stars flickering as though they, too, were dying. The first of the Ancient Ones, Ankarth, was already here, standing tall on the horizon like a monstrous shadow, his presence sucking the very light from the universe. We are eternal, Ankarth's voice boomed, reverberating through space, and you are but a fleeting spark. You cannot defy us, mortal. Kalen's heart raced, but he stood firm, his hand tightened around the shard. The shard wasn't just a piece of Seraphina's essence. It was a fragment of the very balance that held the universe together, a fragment capable of undoing the chaos the Ancient Ones sought to bring. Seraphina's final gift, the last light, was more than a weapon, it was the embodiment of life, death, and the cosmic harmony that had been so grievously disrupted by their return. Ankarth's shadow loomed ever closer, his form shifting and coiling in the void like a serpent. The vastness of his power was nearly suffocating, but Kalen knew that this was their only chance. With every passing second, the universe slipped further toward destruction. In his mind, he heard Seraphina's voice again, soft and warm. The balance must be restored. Kalen, you are not alone in this. The universe will fight with you. Trust in it. With a deep breath, Kalen raised the shard high, its glow growing brighter by the second. The Ancient Ones, sensing the power of the shard, paused, their dark forms shifting uneasily. Ankarth's eyes narrowed, sensing a change in the air, but it was too late. The battle begins. As Kalen activated the shard, a brilliant wave of light erupted from it, spilling across the universe like a river of pure energy. The force of it shattered Ankarth's shadow, pushing it back. For a moment, the vastness of space was illuminated by the brilliance of Seraphina's essence, a beacon of hope that reached out across the cosmos, rekindling the stars and forcing the darkness to retreat. The Ancient One recoiled, but his fury only grew. The shadows around him twisted, becoming more solid, more defined. He reached forward with a hand made of pure void, its size incomprehensible, a crushing weight meant to smother the light. But the light was not alone. From every corner of the galaxy, the forces of life responded, the remnants of Seraphina's legacy, the very essence of the universe that she had once protected, surged to Kalen's side. It was not just Seraphina's bloodline that was reborn, it was the collective strength of every soul Seraphina had ever guided, every life she had ever touched. The ancient beings who had once kept the balance, the remnants of long-dead civilizations, the brave warriors who had fought under the Harrower's rule, and even the innocent people of distant worlds, they all rose in a final, unified effort. Their collective will became a force as strong as any star, creating a barrier of light that shielded Kalen from the crushing force of Ankarth. The shard began to pulse faster, glowing brighter as it drew power from every corner of the universe. The raw energy rippled outward, causing the very fabric of reality to warp, as though space itself was bending to Kalen's will. Ankarth's wrath. Ankarth's form shuddered, the pure entropy he embodied clashing against the overwhelming force of Seraphina's essence. He let out a terrible, guttural roar that echoed across the void, a sound that threatened to shatter the stars. He brought his massive arm down, but before it could reach Kalen, the force of the shard unleashed a shockwave of energy so potent that it tore through the very fabric of Ankarth's being. "You cannot stop me," the Ancient One screamed, his form cracking as though it were made of glass. I am the end, the beginning. The universe is mine. But Kalen's eyes blazed with defiance. No, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the cosmic storm that surrounded them. You are nothing. With one final, forceful thrust, the shard drove itself into the heart of Ankarth. The light from the shard exploded outward, cascading through the galaxy like a supernova, drowning out the darkness, purging the void with the raw power of creation itself. For a moment, there was silence. Then, in an instant, the void shattered, the very fabric of space and time unraveling as Ankarth's form was torn apart by the overwhelming power of Seraphina's essence. He screamed once more, but it was a futile cry, swallowed by the vastness of the universe. In his final moments, the Ancient One was undone, reduced to nothing more than dust scattered across the cosmos. The cost of victory. Kalen collapsed to his knees, exhausted. The shard had drained him of nearly all his strength, but the battle was won. The light from Seraphina's essence continued to pulse, restoring balance and pushing the remaining forces of entropy into the far reaches of space. The Ancient Ones had been defeated. Their reign of destruction ended. But the universe had been forever changed. The cost of victory was great. As Kalen looked up at the stars, he knew that the scars left by the Ancient Ones would never fully fade. The universe would remember the war, remember the sacrifices made to restore balance. And yet, there was hope. The stars shone brighter now, as though the universe itself was taking a deep breath, recovering from its near-death experience. New life would grow, new civilizations would rise from the ashes of the old. The cycle of life and death would continue. But now, with a renewed understanding of the fragile harmony that bound everything together, Kalen, though weary, allowed himself a brief moment of peace. He had done it. Seraphina's legacy, the last light, had been the key to saving the universe. He had done what needed to be done. And now, the universe could begin to heal. But deep in the void, far from the light, something stirred. It was not a being, but a force, a quiet whisper, carried on the cosmic winds. The balance had been restored, for now, but the universe would always be in peril. For as long as life existed, so too would the specter of death and entropy. And with that knowledge, Kalen stood tall, knowing that he, too, would continue to protect the balance that Seraphina had so lovingly guarded. The universe would always pay.